Welcome back. Mayor Muriel Bowser offered her strongest words yet about President Trump's federalization of the DC police as the National Guard hit the streets for the first time as part of the Trump administration's push to curb what they claim is out-of-control crime in the nation's capital. Bowser, who has acknowledged her limited legal authority to prevent a federal takeover, is instead urging D.C. residents to take action. Here's some of what she said during a virtual town hall last night.
We all need to do what we can in our space, in our lane, to protect our city and to protect our autonomy, to protect our home rule, and get to the other side of this guy and make sure we elect a Democratic House so that we have a backstop to this authoritarian push.
Still, Bowser has also said that she wants to take advantage of the federal support during its temporary 30-day takeover of D.C.'s police force. Anything longer than that would require congressional authorization. But speaking today from the Kennedy Center, the president suggested that he doesn't need Congress, but will ask them, a sentiment echoed by border czar Tom Homan earlier today.
Are you talking to Congress about extending it, or do you believe 30 days is sufficient?
Well, if it's a national emergency, we can do it without Congress, but we expect to be to Congress before Congress very quickly. We're going to be asking for extensions on that, long-term extensions, because you can't have 30 days.
Do you fear, though, that if the time frame is set that after 30 days, hey, our authority's over, that then these criminals that took themselves off the streets might come right back?
The president's authority is never over.
Joining me now, senior national security correspondent Courtney Kube and senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley. Courtney, first to you. Last night we saw the first National Guard troops deployed on the streets of D.C. Is this just going to continue? Do we expect an increased troop presence in the coming days? And based on what we've seen so far, what exactly is their mission?
Yeah, so the total number is going to grow throughout the week, up to about 800 members of the D.C. National Guard. But the number that are expected to be on the street at any given time should stay relatively consistent. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 200 troops will be on the ground supporting law enforcement at any given time. So think of this as 800 total people assigned to this, but working in shifts of 100 to 200 at a time. Now, they are working to support law enforcement with things like crowd control, perimeter security, but they are not expected to be engaged in any kind of direct law enforcement activities while they're on this. Think of this as, in some cases, they will be supporting law enforcement who will be going after potential criminals, while the D.C. Guard are back behind, in some cases even doing things like administrative and logistical support, sort of freeing up the law enforcement so that they can go after any kind of criminals or crime. Another mission that we expect them to have is exactly what we saw last night, Ryan, and that was protecting some of the national, or a presence at some national monuments. The idea there is, again, to deter crime, but also just to show presence, to try to shore up security in the city. Of course, President Trump has said that there's a crime emergency here, but many of the police statistics really don't back that up, Ryan.
Trump says that he's going to seek an extension of the federalization of the D.C. police. That does require congressional approval for anything longer than 30 days, but are there any restrictions to how long he could keep the Guard on the streets?
Yeah, and that 30-day restriction didn't really seem to bother President Trump today. He sort of sloughed it off and wasn't concerned at all about that as a possible roadblock to his effort here. As far as the National Guard, right now, this call-up is until at least September 25th. But officials are saying, look, this could be shorter than that, technically, or it could go longer than that. We even heard from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Fox News the other night, asked about the timeline for this. And he said, look, it could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months. It's going to be as long as it takes. At this point, the federal government is paying for the National Guard deployment, so they could go as long as the commander-in-chief, President Trump, decides that he wants them to be out on the streets.
Do we expect any chain of command issues here when it comes to the intermingling of the Guard and federal law enforcement and MPD? There's so many different enforcement agencies that are involved in this.
Yeah, I don't know of any place that is as complicated as the District of Columbia when it comes to all the different law enforcement agencies that exist. But at this point, the D.C. Guard is really officials that we're talking to, I mean, look, and keep in mind, we're on day, 2 or 3 of this year. They just started checking in yesterday. They just were on the streets last night. At this point, we are not seeing any indications of that. They'll fall under this joint task force. They are, again, in support of law enforcement. But, you know, we've heard this cooperative tone from D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, from the police chief, but they have also been very clear about saying that they are going to watch and see how these federal officials, including the D.C. Guard, are used, and they will be watching to ensure that their relatively narrow and limited authorities that they have been granted for this mission, those do not expand out into anything that they view as potentially concerning, Ryan.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. Let's turn to you now, Julia. And if you can talk to us a bit about the mix of federal law enforcement on the ground, and both city and administration officials say that they've had good coordination on resources. Is that what you're hearing from these agencies?
Yeah, I mean, good coordination, but some really blurry lines when it comes to ICE. And just to reiterate what Courtney was saying about how usual and common it is for federal police to be working with the Metropolitan Police Department in D.C. I once went on a ride-along with the Capitol Police, and they told me there were more than 30 law enforcement agencies just right here in this city. That includes Amtrak Police, Park Police, the Metro Police, Federal Protective Services. It's very common for these agencies to be working together, and they have good relationships. But I wanted to call your attention to what's happening with ICE right now, because they have different parts of ICE that have been deployed in different ways. We know that they are enhancing immigration arrests, and they're really publicizing this on social media right now. They're operating on the Mall today. Yesterday, they were at Home Depot and in Union Station, but it's unclear exactly what they're doing in each situation. In some cases, as I understand it, they're working with the U.S. Marshal Service to conduct what would be arrest of citizens who are just criminals in this situation, suspected criminals. In other cases, they're doing what ICE does, fulfilling ICE's mission of arresting people with immigration violations. And it's getting confusing to figure out what they're doing in each part. And I even pressed ICE today on that. And they said, well, look, if they come across an immigrant in the spirit of fulfilling Trump's order of trying to fight crime in D.C., then of course they're going to arrest an immigrant. But the lines are blurring here, and I think it's getting harder to see how this agency that has historically been just about immigration is also being used to enforce domestic law against U.S. citizens at the same time. Also, another example of this is the DEA. Their administrator, Cole, says that federal law enforcement will embed with the MPD. Is this an agency that has the training for this kind of patrolling? It seems like a similar issue to what you're talking about with these ICE agents. Yeah, training can get really hairy here, especially when you have DEA agents that are used to going in on really high-profile, high-threat operations, and oftentimes a local police department is trained to de-escalate a situation, particularly when you're dealing with someone who may have a mental health issue. That is part of their training. But the DEA administrator is in charge of this operation in D.C., and so embedding with MPD is within his purview now. Of course, you're getting into how long that purview could extend. But yeah, I think a lot of the questions that are being raised here is not just about these people working together. We've seen that before. But when it comes to the authorities of these law enforcement agencies, their training, and what it means really through optics. As a citizen of D.C., a lot of citizens of D.C. are watching, people march through the streets of Georgetown, of 14th Street. People were going out to dinner last night, seeing people, in their full gear marching through the streets. What does that do to the optics of people here if they feel that they're being occupied, really, as the mayor put it? Okay, Julia Ainsley, thank you for that report.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.